Hi guys, this is Lorena. Welcome back to my channel. It's really exciting to have you here, and if you're new, welcome. In this video today, we are going to talk about the birth chart of Colleen Ballinger. Colleen is someone that I have been following for quite some time, and I used to be a fan of hers when she was recording her pregnancy journey with her first son. But after some time of following her, getting more educated on child exploitation, on social media and so on, I really started to distance myself from her, and I haven't followed her as closely. But recently there have been some backlash regarding her interactions with minors and how she uses teenagers and children for her own benefit in her career, and also to gossip about other people. If you want to know more about that, I really recommend you watch Adam's videos, because he was the one that initially came up with some allegations in 2020, which I think are quite disturbing. So because of that, this video is not really gonna be an unbiased overview, but rather is going to be an analysis of her chart regards to her career and why are these things coming up right now. And I might have some opinions jumping in there. But first, you can see Colleen's birth chart right over here. So she's got a Scorpio stellium, she's got a Cancer moon as well, Aquarius Mars, and Capricorn rising. The planets are pretty well distributed across the chart, although there's a little bit of a bigger majority of planets on the upper hemisphere of the chart, which is very typical of people who do work on social media or just have some very public lives. So we have the ascendant in Capricorn here. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, which falls in the 11th house. This shows that her chart ruler, aka her life theme, is going to be around Sagittarius, so international energy, learning, spreading wisdom or spreading information, or simply connecting with people, because of the 11th house over here. The 11th house is the house of networking, social media, but also technology, politics, charities, and so on. So a very big theme of her life is pretty much the theme of traveling, getting to live internationally and connect with people internationally, and also spreading all of this information or these connections on social media and on the public eye. It's interesting her sun also falls over here, because the sun is also a very important planet, which represents the ego and what gives a person the most vitality and power. The sun in the 11th house shows that she's a very sociable person, and she does have a theme of connecting with others, and that's where she gets a lot of her happiness from. When we look at the career, this is very interesting because the 10th house starts in Libra, and people who have their 10th house in Libra are usually really good at maintaining harmony and balance, or at least the appearances of that. Libra loves to socialize as part of the career and to have those business contacts and connections. Libra also loves a little bit of gossip, just like Gemini energy, and we see her 6th house of the routine and the work environment also starting in Gemini. So there's definitely a lot of communications, a lot of connections being formed, no matter what career path she would have chosen. The actual thing that attracts her to the professional world is also the artistic world, which is what we're going to see in a second, but also this energy of communication, talk, spreading information, connecting with others. Now, the interesting thing about Gemini and Libra energy when they're attached to career houses like this, we either have a person who thrives off of community, connecting with people, like genuinely spreading a lot of positivity, but Gemini is also an energy that loves to gossip, that loves to connect with people in a more not necessarily healthy way. And it's very possible for people with this combination of energies to kind of turn into this energy of gossip, because they love the stimulation of learning new things and connecting with others, but it's not really used for, like, let's just say healthy purposes, and it's not really helping them progress towards their purpose. And it's interesting because her north node is in the 3rd house, so her sole purpose is to be a little bit more open-minded, and because it's in Aries, she was meant to kind of be a pioneer of some sort of community. But what is really interesting here is because the south node's in the 9th house, she brings a very much an energy of I know everything, which is why a lot of people with the north node in the 3rd house struggle with acquiring new information or being open-minded to new mindsets or new ideas. And it's obviously not all people with the north node in the 3rd house have this flaw, because they work on it and they open up to it, and it's fine. But we do see it's a common struggle of people with the south node in the 9th house and the north node in the 3rd house to acquire new information, to be open-minded to the fact that they may be wrong or not. Just just as with any person, right? We all have an ego. We don't want it to get hurt, but particularly people with the North and the third house are here to learn more from their communities, to learn more from what other people are telling them, and also to share the newly found information and inspiration with others. So it's not just to keep the newly found wisdom to themselves, but also to keep on passing it along. So community, long story short, is not just something important for her career because the 6th house is in Gemini, the 10th house is in Libra, which are social houses, because her chart ruler is in the 11th house of social media, among other things, but also the sole purpose is in Aries in the 3rd house, so leadership and assertive energy within a community where people have something in common. If we go back to the 10th house, so as I mentioned, it starts in Libra. Libra is ruled by Venus, and Venus is retrograde in the 10th house and in Scorpio and conjunct Pluto. Now, this combination of information is really intriguing because this shows a lot of challenges around Venus as a planet. If you refer to traditional astrology techniques, we like to look at the condition of a planet. And what does it mean if you have a planet with a lot of negative points? It means that there's going to be some lessons and some karma coming up in that area of life, or, the house that is ruled by that planet. So in this case, because Venus is retrograde in the 10th house, conjunct Pluto, and also in Scorpio, and it's the ruler of the 10th house too, this shows that her career would have a lot of things to do with the planet Venus, first of all, because it rules the 10th house. And when your 10th house ruler is in the 10th house, that almost guarantees a chance for success when it comes to social status. So it's a good thing. She's trying to make a name for herself on social media, but because Venus is retrograde and in Scorpio, this also relates to some issues to loving in a healthy way, or in a way that is appreciated by others. Venus is not just a planet of artistry, which is why she is attracted to the area of artistic entertainment and so on. Because Venus is in Scorpio, this shows a very possessive nature when it comes to love, but also when it comes to how you're going to share your appreciation and your love towards others. And because Venus is conjunct Pluto, this energy is kind of amplified in a way. What I find a little bit interesting is I've looked at her chart in the past and I couldn't pinpoint why this was, but now it makes sense. Venus is the ruler of the 5th house, and the 5th house is the house of children. And Venus is conjunct Pluto, the planet of transformation, stubbornness, and control. And I've always looked at this aspect as her using Cancer fundraising to help her grow in career. Because obviously when you do a lot of charity, you donate money. That's a very commendable thing to do. That's amazing. But it also helps you, right? It also helps you gain social status. It helps you be more appreciated by your followers and gain more followers and subscribers and so on. So it's interesting how the planet that rules the house of children is conjunct Pluto, showing the risk of acting stubbornly or controllingly towards children. And if you have this aspect, let's say the 5th house ruler is conjunct Pluto. So the positive side of Pluto aspects to Venus being the ruler of the 5th house here, could look like a lot of passion and loving kids and performing with a great sense of talent, which I'm sure she does have in a certain amount. But the negative, which you may play into simultaneously or not at all, depending on what kind of person you are, is definitely acting in a very stubborn or controlling or even manipulative way. And it's interesting, Mercury is also retrograde, showing a tendency to feel misunderstood. But at the same time, Mercury retrograde in Scorpio conjunct Pluto can also show a lot of stubborn communication. So she feels misunderstood, and she acts very stubbornly to prove her point because Mercury is conjunct Pluto. That's like a life theme of hers, but it specifically plays out in the career because all of these are present in the 10th house. What is interesting at the same time is Chiron is in the 6th house and in Gemini. Now, people with Chiron in the 6th house tend to be more triggered in the workplace. So Chiron represents where your wounds are coming up the most and where you tend to feel a little bit not like yourself. So when Chiron is over here in the 6th house and in Gemini, it shows like miscommunication issues are causing her quite a lot of anxiety and fears. But at the same time, we're looking at the ruler of Gemini, which is Mercury. Mercury is in Scorpio conjunct Pluto. So whenever she feels misunderstood or whenever she feels like, her Gemini needs are not being met, she's acting very stubbornly, very controllingly, and sometimes even in a manipulative way, there is the danger of that. Again, that's the negative interpretation, because the positive interpretation here could be that she could investigate very well what her wounds were if she had the time and if she wanted to. And if she didn't have fear, if she chose not to live in fear and anxiety, she actually could have very good investigative abilities. This is the chart of a person who could do really, really well, like even in psychology and investigative research and stuff like that. But that is just another point, because she didn't choose that path, right? So this Chiron in Gemini in the 6th house definitely shows triggers are coming up. Lilith in the 6th house also shows sometimes an inability to get organized, or there's a lot of people, I'm gonna give you that, there's a lot of people with Black Moon Lilith in the 6th house who have really good schedules, who learn to overcome their challenges when it comes to setting up a routine that is healthy and organized. But again, Lilith in the 6th house could contribute to why a lot of the times she's feeling like she doesn't have time to do things. She feels overwhelmed by her routine. And I will give her that. People with 6th house in Gemini do have the need to multitask and to have like multiple things happening at the same time. So I can definitely understand how she feels like there's just a lot of things happening in her life. But it's interesting that Lilith is here. At the same time, she gets overwhelmed by it, and there's a risk of not fixing it at all. Lilith in Gemini, again, it could show problems with communication in the workplace, because the zodiac sign matters too. Now that we've talked about her career and her chart ruler and all of the indicators surrounding her career and all that, I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into her zodiac sign placements of the personal planets. So she has the majority of her planets in water signs, except for Mars, which is in Aquarius. First of all, I wanted to look into this Cancer moon. Now, she has been criticized a lot for her crying too much. This is a very typical thing for people with the moon in Cancer. This is not to say that people with the moon in Cancer are not resilient, but people with moon in Cancer are more sensitive when it comes to their feelings, which, if they are healthy people, if they are in tune with their feelings, this can play out in very maternal reactions, a high level of empathy and intuition and sensitivity. The negative implication of a Cancer moon is that they can be very overbearing, sometimes even emotionally manipulative, and they indeed do cry a little bit more than the average person, which can be very disturbing at some point. But people with Cancer moons, if they don't feel emotionally validated, or if they feel like just a little bit of their emotional sides they're not understood, they turn a little bit overbearing. It's like they're expecting someone else to fulfill their emotional needs and to fill their cup, which forms a square to her midheaven, which is her social status. So it feels like this is the one planet that truly affects her career progression and her career growth. If there is emotional commitment here, and if there's a fulfillment for her to have a secure attachment within herself, then this square is not a problem anymore. But it does look like she does have a lot of emotional stress going on, and that in turn causes her to be like crying all the time in videos and so on. So I thought that was an interesting combination. I think it's also interesting that people with the moon in Cancer, specifically with women with the moon in Cancer, tend to be very emotionally protective towards their kids. But what I think is happening here is there's some sort of cognitive dissonance happening in her life. I do truly believe, just looking at her chart, that she does have good intentions according to her mental abilities, that she's doing the right thing when she's parenting her children, but she doesn't understand that by exposing her children online, she's causing them a lot of difficulties later on in life, and that she's exposing them to predators and so on. And what I think is interesting here is how normally when I see someone with the Cancer moon, I see someone who's a little bit more involved in understanding all the risks of their children, because they're very, very overprotective parents. But what I see in this case is that she might have those traits on an emotional level, but because her kids are literally her coworkers, they're jumping under the 6th house category of Gemini energy, where she has Chiron and Lilith, and where all the manipulation energy is coming up. Now, when you see a person, Colleen, repeatedly using children for her own personal career growth, whether that is her children, whether that is other children or teenagers and minors, that is fifth house energy. So the reason why she's acting and using children in multiple ways to help her grow in her career, whether that is ethical or not, is reflected in the birth chart with this Venus retrograde in Scorpio conjunct Pluto. Again, something does not become action until a person, using their free will, they act on it. So this is not to say that the chart is the explanation of why she's acting in this way towards all children in her life, but it's certainly a reflection of the negative outcome that can come up when a person's not evolved. Because if you want to know, again, the positive interpretation of someone with this chart, so someone who would be very aware of all the issues that come with, let's say, grooming and child exploitation online and so on and so forth, we would see someone who maybe acts very protectingly to investigate situations where children are suffering and to protect them. So she could even turn 180 degrees according to her chart and do investigative and protective work for children. But this is something that takes a character change. And unfortunately, character changes are not things that we see in the birth chart. All right, let's have a look at their transits. Let's see what's going on in the secondary progressions and in the transit chart over here. So looking at her transit chart, you can see here in blue we have her own birth chart, and then in orange we have the planets on the sky. So the very first thing is that ever since this whole situation exploded on YouTube, the sun was in her 6th house. Mercury also was just about to enter her 6th house. The 6th house is the house of the workspace, the working environment, and the work that you do. So this has happened around the time where the temporary planets were showing that there's a big outburst of information and focus coming up in her career and in her own routine and workplace and so on. There's definitely some more general transits happening at the same time, which may prolong this, especially in the personal effects that she's encountering. Particularly Chiron is over her north node. The north node is about to enter Aries, so she's entering a lunar node return next year. Chiron over the north node usually shows that there is very intense healing happening in order to help a person move towards their purpose. So it's she might get a little bit more triggered, but those triggers are what are going to help her realize how she can move towards her purpose and how she can advance in life in a healthy way and in a way that aligns with, positive spiritual values. This is supposing a person does follow the spiritual path. North node in the 4th house does show there is more focus on the family, and usually there's some sort of, I don't want to say resignation, but there is an ending coming in the career when you see a south node over the 10th house. And because the north node will be in Aries for the next year and a half, and her IC is in Aries, we might see this playing out more over the next year. I don't know whether she's going to end her career. I think that this is just really possible. She's going to switch up a lot of things in her career. This might look like not vlogging anymore. This might look like, I don't know, changing up her vlogs, removing her kids. Oh, I hope. It's interesting. Jupiter is in the 4th house. There's usually growth in the family area when this transit happens, or there's the purchase of a larger home or renovation happening. There's usually a lot of good energy coming in the home environment, so she can feel quite supported by her family during this time. Or at least this is her perception. Saturn in the 2nd house definitely brings lessons around the topic of money, and Chiron conjunct the north node shows there is a lot of healing to be obtained over the next year, so that she can move towards her purpose in a healthy way. When it comes to the secondary progressions, the progressed sun is entering her 1st house this year. So her progressed sun has been in her 11th house and her 12th house all of her life. And it is this year that the progressed sun enters the 1st house. Now, usually this feels like a huge change in a person's life, because the 1st house is a much better house than the 12th house if you ask a person on an ego level, because the 1st house is a house of shining, leadership, confidence. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I definitely think this shows there's going to be a really huge change in her life coming up. If it's not already reflected in what's happening right now, but it feels like the goal for her, or at least in her own perception, is that she's having a new beginning, especially with the progressed moon approaching her progressed sun. So she's going to have a progressed new moon in about 3 years away from now. But usually 2 to 3 years before a progressed new moon, you start to end a lot of things in your life so you can begin a new cycle. So when I had a progressed new moon in my progress chart, that was when I got into astrology. So that's just another example, but I'm definitely expecting her to switch up her career in a lot of ways over the next 2 years, but more specifically over the next year and a half, because that's when the lunar node return is happening. So yeah, what are your thoughts on this? I told you I do have a lot of opinions on this whole situation, and I feel like I have a lot of opinions, particularly around the idea of child exploitation. We're probably gonna have a couple more videos to talk about this, but it's not okay for a person to repeatedly use minors, so people who cannot consent in general, or people who are unable to have their opinions heard for their own growth, for her own growth in her career. It's just not ethical. It's just unrespectful, and it shows that she's not using her purpose wisely, because then when we look at people with the North Node in Aries and in the 3rd house, yeah, we look at you taking initiative and having some sort of control or having some sort of leadership power within a community, but it doesn't have to happen in an unhealthy way or in a way in which you're not respecting other people anymore. So I hope that the situation will help everyone grow and heal. Ultimately, that's why we are doing these videos. That's why I tend to look at charts in order to help people realize where they have to grow. But we're gonna see what happens. There's no way we can control it, and I think we should just give everyone time to heal and move on. But yeah, let me know, what do you think? What are your opinions? Post your comments down in the section down below. Now, if you want to become an astrologer, if you want to learn the type of work that I do have an astrology academy, which is linked down below. Also, if you want to book a reading with me, also that is available down below. The academy is fully remote. It's fully online. You can do it at your own time. There's no time limit, and you also get a certificate upon completion. The readings are also fulfilled online, but I'm also available for in-person meetings if you are in Bucharest, Romania. So other than that, thank you so much for watching this, and wishing you a really lovely day. Take care, and bye-bye.